Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I'm going to be talking about the history and what the trade union stands for. So the labor movement is a union that's a representation for bettering the working conditions and the treatments towards their employees. Back in history, where it all started, from building a new nation in the 1600s to struggling for freedom during the 1800s, which then led up to the fight for economic and social justice during the start of the 1950s. During the mid-1950s, unions in the US began to organize 1 in 3 non-farm workers, with a peak of labor's power of unionized workers' strength throughout the decades. For instance, in 1965, Cesar Chavez formed the American Federation of Labor Congress of Industrial Organizations. The fight for better wages commenced from way back in the 1890s, originally when individuals decided to stand up for their own rights. The transformation of economic change was an early labor law that's main focus was distinguishing the two classes between the rich and the poor, because in a common working class, it was rooted for sharing a common constituency while still having separate but functioning distinctions. And here in the picture, it shows different ways why they went on strike. The undeniable reality in the labor movement is a break with the past, in turn denying the labor reform any further for the roles and the struggles of many American and immigrant workers. And here Aliison will be discussing more over minimum wage.
Hello, my name is Aliison Mason, and I will be talking about why the labor movement is important and necessary. As we know, the labor movement happened in order to help employees fight for better wages, reasonable hours, and to stop child labor. The first issue is the need for better wages, which an attempt to solve this problem was made with a set minimum wage. Minimum wage is the amount needed to be paid to an employee that will supply them with enough money for clothing, food, and shelter. As inflation rises, so does the need for salary raise. However, our system has not kept pace with inflation, and we are being paid up to 27% less than our relatives were 50 years ago. Right now in California, the minimum wage is $13 an hour. By 2023, it is supposed to be raised to $15 an hour. Another problem that sparked the labor movement is the need for reasonable hours. Right now, there is no law for how many hours an adult can work per week, and 50 hours is no longer seen as normal, as most adults work way more than that. They have to make enough money to support themselves and their families. You are supposed to have a half-hour break every 5 hours of work, but there is no law to enforce this, and it is up to every employer. The last reason why the labor movement needed to happen, and still needs to happen, is to stop child labor. Legally, a minor can work 4 hours a day on a school day and 8 hours on a non-school day, and the youngest someone can work is 16. Unfortunately, this law does not exist in much of the world, and children are either forced against their will to work or have to work in order to support themselves and their families. A final area that is a pressing issue for 2021 that involves the labor movement is how immigrants are treated in the workforce. They are looked down on in the workforce and extremely underpaid. They have to work twice as much in order to support themselves and their families. The labor movement has been an ongoing movement for decades and needs to continue because there is still a lot of work to be done.
Hello, I am Levi, and I will be discussing who the labor movement benefits and what group of people helped start it. So, as already discussed, the working class was a group that helped establish the spirit of the labor movement. These figures were fighting to create unions to benefit the working class. The industrial and agricultural sectors were the most important in the beginning. Nowadays, all industries are creating unions. For people in the industrial sector, organized labor unions fought for reasonable hours, better wages, and safer working conditions. The origins of the labor movement lay in the formative years of the American nation, when a free wage labor market emerged in the artisan trades late in the colonial period. Unions usually were birthed out of strikes and workers feeling like they were not being treated right or they were being taken advantage of. These reform movements might have seemed at odds with trade unionism, aiming as they did at the cooperative commonwealth rather than a higher wage, appealing broadly to all producers rather than strictly to wage workers, and eschewing the trade union reliance on the strike and boycott. Contemporary saw no contradiction. Trade unionism tended to be the workers' immediate needs, labor reform to the higher hopes. The two were held to be strands of a single movement, rooted in a common working class constituents and to some degree sharing a common leadership. But equally important, they were strands that had to be kept operationally separate and functionally distinct. The most influential advocate of the labor movement is Cesar Chavez. Chavez's unique ability to protest and very impactful speeches has set a foundation within the labor movement, as explained in the United Farm Workers Organization. Cesar made people aware of the struggles of farm workers for better pay and safer working conditions. Cesar Chavez set a gigantic footprint within the labor movement that has inspired generations and generations of people fighting for their. Unfortunately, history always seems to repeat itself. The same reason Cesar Chavez fought for be seen in today's working class generation.
Hello, my name is Juan, and I'll be speaking about more on more about the working class today. As summarized from my fellow colleagues, labor movement is an organization that improves the rights, conditions, working conditions, as well as wages of the working class. COVID has a gigantic effect on families and loved ones throughout 2020. At a time of need, business should support their essential workers and provide a better security financially and in health. In researching, I've uncovered cases of negligence towards employees, most recently in the Tyson Corporation. Tyson Corporation, for example, in Amarillo, Texas, Tyson, approximately 1,000 Tyson workers have contracted the COVID-19 virus, and more than 20 have passed. The corporation is seen neglecting their employees at a time during the pandemic, and families are left hopeless and nowhere to turn to. An attorney at law that represents the families of the past loved ones has stated that the system on how they support their employees is completely against the worker. The system is designed to save the company as much money as possible, just to get get the employee back to work as soon as possible. It's extremely sad to see a company, a franchise, take advantage of families that are vulnerable. And we, as in this generation, should take better steps into helping the working class. And Marcos will go over in details on how to get involved within the labor movement. Marcos?
Hi, my name is Marcos, and I'm going to be discussing how we can bring awareness and help to the workers of Tyson. After the death of Tyson workers due to COVID-19 and Tyson for not taking the necessary measures to keep the workers safe, the families put a lawsuit against Tyson for not respecting the workers' rights. But now those families are facing a problem too of having their lawsuits getting buried by the GOP, who are trying to pass a legislation that will pretty much prevent workers from suing the companies if they are COVID-19 related. But how can we help them? One of them, I think, is voting. Voting for representatives that support lower class workers and the unions, bringing major legislations that help the union and the workers. As another way we can help is protesting. Protesting has worked throughout years by bringing awareness to the people. And one of the good examples is Cesar Chavez. And another way we can help is by sharing information. Sharing information with friends and family and loved ones can actually not just help the families, but also help other people. And a great tool we have nowadays is social media. Social media is a good example for bringing awareness, and like other movements like the Me Too movement, like the LGBTQ and Black Lives Matters have used this platform to bring awareness to the rest of the world. And that way we can use it too for labor movement.
All
right, and Levi is going to go into detail on our poster that we created.
All right,
Levi?
so for the poster, I decided to have two big figures in two different industries that are fighting for their rights. And on the left, I drew a construction worker who is protesting with a sign that says safer working conditions. And then right next to him is a teacher who is also protesting, but for a different reason, for better salaries and healthcare, because throughout the whole country and even in other countries, teachers are very, very underpaid for how much work they do, because they essentially are teaching the leaders for tomorrow on how to be better. And it's a really big deal. And I think that they should get paid a lot more. And I think that they should have better healthcare, because a lot of schools don't have healthcare systems for their teachers. And then right above them, I wrote, support the labor movement because they fight for the working class, which is important because, I mean, most people are in the working class because everybody works unless you're, below 16 or something, but everybody works and everybody knows someone that works. So everybody's pretty much in the working class. So support the labor movement because they'll support you. And yeah,